I'm delighted that we have two Stephens this afternoon, which is great. Firstly, we have Stephen Wilson from Police Scotland, who's going to talk to us all about how to be safer ourselves and keep our pupils safer, and some of the work that you do. That's fantastic. So thank you very much, Stephen.
Thanks, Kate. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honour to be here and speak to you today. It's a subject that's very, very close to my heart, and that we're involved in fighting against cybercrime at the top level. It's a huge lower level that we need to try and educate our children about to try and make them safer. And I think probably with the people in here today are some of the most important people across Scotland in relation to getting this right for our children in Scotland, but also to feed the rest of the Scottish economy and to grow cyber as a business a business area in its own right. First of all, cyber, the national picture from a UK perspective, how do we see it? UK government in 2010 graded it as a Tier 1 threat, bracketed along with international terrorism, major natural disasters and international military crisis. And it's putting it right up there at the absolute top. And they invested at that time some 650 million into the UK's defences against cyber. The vast majority of that went to military and to likes of GCHQ, but some of it did come down into law enforcement. But why are they actually saying that this is such a critical factor in protecting the UK? Well, one of the studies at the time came across with the indication that the cost to the UK economy was something like £27 billion a year as a result of cyber. Now, I've got to say personally, I think that's maybe overestimating it. I don't think it's possible to come out with an accurate figure for this, but I would say it's a significant impact on the UK economy. But they broke it down further, 2.2 billion cost to government, 3.1 billion to individual citizens, and £21 billion cost to industry. And what I see from a Scottish perspective is Scottish businesses on a regular basis being hit, simply because they're not prepared, they've not thought about it, and the attitude many times is, it will happen to somebody else before it happens to me. I think the sad reality is nowadays that it's likely to happen to any of us. Firstly, to put cybercrime in some sort of context, what is it? Now, we hear a lot about it in the press nowadays. Cybercrime is a new sexy word. What does it actually mean? It's great in an audience of technical people, but a lot of times speaking to normal members of the public trying to explain it, and I break it into two particular areas. There's the old crimes that have been enhanced or actually grown by the internet. If you look at theft, if you look at frauds, extortion, they've been about for time immemorial. It's always happened. But what we see now is that the internet has allowed people to actually massively grow the scope of this. My main job is fighting against serious and organised crime. We've got something like 200 serious and organised crime groups identified in Scotland. Now, very few of them are actually specifically cyber-enabled, but more and more they see this as an opportunity. Organised crime is about entrepreneurs. If there's money and opportunity, they will go there. Fraud, we've seen groups who specialised in conventional frauds for years and years diversifying into fraud over the internet. And again, the actual money they can make is significant. But I think the important thing is now, if you look back 10, 15, 20 years ago, the conventional face of organised crime meant that the crime group had to be somewhere generally, physically close location to the victims. The reality is now that organised crime groups from Russia, China, South America could be equally impacting on the Scottish population as well as somebody based in Glasgow, Edinburgh or the North East. That's the reality of what we face. Probably the biggest worry for me is the child abuse side of things. If you look at what's going on the internet, 65% of my staff across Scotland, my forensic resources, 65% of their time is spent on indecent image of children cases. That's the reality of what's out there on the internet. But what are the new crimes? What are we starting to see coming over the hill? What's the things that are starting to test us now in law enforcement? Denial of service attacks, again, becoming more and more commonplace. Again, Police Scotland, our website's been DDoS attack on it. We've seen government officials being taken down. We've seen large companies getting taken down on a regular basis. I'll touch on later on the availability of this type of service. And again, the growth of malware now getting distributed across the world is growing exponentially year on year. And again, this is the type of thing we need to be speaking to Scottish business, but also to individuals and to kids about to make them aware of it. And this next slide is a really telling one. Mikkel Hipponen, really fantastic lecturer on the TED series. If you've not seen him, I encourage you to listen to him. He believes, and I wholly subscribe to this, over the past probably 10 years, we've seen crime figures dropping substantially. His position and a growing body of opinion would tend to suggest that potentially you're more likely to become a victim of a crime on the internet than what you are in the physical world. What does that mean for us as law enforcement? We've actually got to change our tactics. We've grown up with an industrial society, moving into an analog society, and now moving into a digital society. We need to be reflective of the society we actually police, and the big thing we need to push now is how do we become more effective about policing online? And again, this starts right at the very basic level. Primary school, secondary school, we need to educate our children so they can move into business, but so they're also protecting themselves. And this is where I think it's vital that we're speaking together regarding this. So what have we seen across Scotland over the last couple of years? Taking some slides, generally over the last 6 months or so for particular areas. This one, Edinburgh, the vishing phone scams. Now this to me is the classic evolution of a particular type of fraud. We used to get voice calls getting made to people before. Now we have organised crime gangs who predominantly in the past specialised in call centre fraud. They now will do research online, identify a company or groups of individuals, potentially deploy malware to get more information out of their systems, and then they'll back that up with a voice call to them. These organised crime groups, they'll have a house with maybe half a dozen people sitting doing this. They'll have a file on Stevie Wilson PLC, all the information around about it. These people are very, very good. They do their research, but it's all done on the internet. And we've seen companies and individuals across Scotland lose hundreds of thousands of pounds. The problem is trying to actually prove this case. Yes, we can tie back IP addresses. Yes, we can do what round about it. But the reality is sometimes the attribution of who is on the phone or who's in the computer, that's where things are starting to become challenging. And indeed, probably the biggest challenge we have nowadays is applying 19th and 20th century legal principles to 21st century criminality. Again, ransomware. Substantially growing problem across Western Europe just now. Again, we did a job with the National Crime Agency came back a couple of months ago to take down one of the main command and control servers. But again, if this was your own personal PC, totally locked out, no access to any of your details, that would affect you. If it's a business, then it becomes even more of a problem for you. Your whole customer database could be there. But the discussion with health came back a few months ago now. They're saying the reality is if some of their systems were infected with the likes of this, there could be critical personal data in there regarding people's drug tolerances, etc., and it could actually be a life or death matter. This is what cybercrime is about nowadays. It affects every single one of us. Again, try to look at it not just in the economic side of things. It's not always about the money. See, the organised crime, yes, definitely money motivated. State-sponsored actors, they're trying to look for commercial advantage, political advantage. But what we've seen, the emergence over the last couple of years is the idea of the hacktivism. Again, we've seen this on a regular basis across Scotland now. Companies getting targeted, Police Scotland getting targeted. If you're out there in the commercial world, you could be a target. We've also seen as the competitors. If you've got a business and somebody's actually a strong competitor for you, take the easy option, buy a denial of service attack and try and take them down. Again, that's happening on a regular basis. Insiders, and again, this is where we probably see the biggest problem. We've got companies investing in black box technology all over the place, putting all their solutions into the technical solution, when often the biggest problem is actually the staff. Staff who don't understand, don't click on this, don't insert the USB drive. And again, back to the audience here today, you are the people who can actually instill this basic cyber hygiene, cyber knowledge with children right at the basis. It's the same idea as riding a bike or driving a car. We've got to teach basic principles so people understand it. And again, the media, we've seen all the stuff regarding the phone hacking, etc. There are people out there who will look to establish as much information as they can, and often the vulnerabilities online are the best place to get this. Bring us back to the school side of things. Again, this is probably something that you will see or hear of on a regular basis in the school. I think it's actually epidemic proportions. The number of investigations we now get coming through the forensic units to prove what has started off with an innocent picture being sent from one child to another, and all of a sudden there's a fallout between girlfriend and boyfriend, and it goes viral. We've seen suicides, attempted suicides on the back of this, and that's the trouble is when something's out there, the problem of actually trying to remove it becomes a real difficulty for us. This case, Daniel Perry, MD here from Fife. Okay, probably well aware of the background round about this one, but young Daniel was online to who he thought was a young girl, about 16 or 17, from America. And he was persuaded to commit an indecent act online, on Skype. As soon as he had completed the act, it changed from a young girl to we're an organised crime group. We have captured the image, we've accessed your full Facebook database. They then replayed the video that they had captured to him so he could see exactly what was there. The position was, pay us a quantity of money, not a huge quantity, or we will distribute this to everybody that knows you, including your parents. And looking at what was there, it was heartbreaking. He's pleased to say, please don't do this. Organised crime, actually in the Philippines, of all places. And the last comments by them was, have you committed suicide yet? He walked from his grandmother's house to the Forth Road Bridge and threw himself off the bridge. That, to me, is probably, it just illustrates the insidious effect of the internet and what can happen to our children round about it. And again, the work we did with CEOP in relation to that, a huge amount of the good work came out of the schools about putting the message out to children to say, look, if this happens to you, come to us for help. Speak to a teacher, speak to a friend, speak to your parents. And again, we need to get the message out there to our kids, because the reality is, we picked up another 14 children across the United Kingdom who were in a similar position to this. 6 of them had either attempted or were seriously contemplating suicide. That's the volume that's going on out there. There's hundreds of other cases at lower level. That's the threat represented to our children. And again, taken from down south, going back a couple of years ago now, the whole idea of trolling, where the bullying becomes so severe that people can't exist in their daily life. And again, in this case, the young girl committed suicide as a consequence of that. That's the type of thing that could go on in our schools on a daily basis. How do we actually tackle that? Spoke about the hacktivism. Again, anonymous, Lulzsec. We've had real challenges, real battles with them over the last couple of years, and it's been a real problem. A lot of significant businesses have been taken down. A lot of government institutions, if you take it, SOCA at the time, now the National Crime Agency, were shut down. CIA were shut down. Very technically able individuals. My question would be, why do these people go to the dark side? What is it we're doing wrong actually doesn't encourage them to move into the fantastic employment opportunities that we have, Scotland, UK and worldwide, and listen to people with these skill sets? To me, this next few slides really illustrate exactly what cybercrime and the global nature is. You're probably aware, the individual, top left, Topiary, part of the Lulzsec hacking group. Jake Davis was on the island of Yell in Shetland. And this, to me, is the most potent example of this. The fact that he could be sitting in a croft in the north of Scotland, in one of the most far outlying areas, and he was able to take down organisations across the world. He and his colleagues had also stolen 750,000 details of personal individuals, some from the NHS, so they could actually continue to fund what they were doing out there. Again, if people think this doesn't happen to us, it's not going to happen in Scotland, I would suggest that is the best example. My officers went with the PECU, the English crime unit at that time, to charter a plane to get to Shetland to go and actually arrest this individual. Through the door, the croft, his whole room was just done up like a computer science lab. Stuff was sitting absolutely everywhere. But again, that's the reality of somebody in our back door who's able to actually have a global impact on it. But again, why did this child move towards the dark side? What could we have done differently to actually encourage them to move towards the benefit of Scotland? What's actually out there? We spoke about denial of service attacks. The slide on the left-hand side, it gives you a list of costs for denial of service attacks. No longer do you need to be technically able to do this. First one, 1 to 4 hours, £25 per hour. So if you've got a competitor you want to take down, quite easy, go on, subscribe to this service, pay in Bitcoin, potentially untraceable, and you take down your competitor. Slide at the top on the right-hand side, that's a cost for credit cards that have not yet been known to be stolen. And again, you look across particular parts of the world, prices are far higher for it, up to like $200, $300. But again, you can get 1,000 cards for that. Then down at the bottom, you can actually go and buy a mule service whereby you cash this money out. So you don't need to have any cyber ability whatsoever. You can actually contract and subcontract all parts of this fraudulent service and walk out with money at the end of the day with very little risk to yourself. That's what we are now having to investigate in law enforcement in the UK. So how do we tackle this? My background involved predominantly in the investigation of serious and organised crime for the past 30 years across Scotland. Deputy at Glasgow Airport for the terrorism side of things, worked in covert policing, worked in the management of sex offenders. I now will be the dinosaur. What we need is skilled kids coming through with degrees or a good understanding of the cyber world. These are the detectives of the future in Scotland. We need individuals who don't need to be taught about this basic stuff, who can actually come in, hit the ground running and conduct inquiries. That is the challenge. But how do we actually get that raw material through and into law enforcement and also into companies across Scotland? I think it starts in here. Primary teachers, secondary teachers, we need to instil the enthusiasm in kids for this, and this way we can actually move things ahead substantially across Scotland. What have we been trying to do about it? Well, I think probably Napier, I've got to say, is one of the biggest success stories that we've seen. The training for police officers at highly technical side of things, going to specialist companies, often charging up to £5,000 a week for one member of staff to be trained, like sort of advanced network investigations. The reality is, in law enforcement, the same as in education, we are facing cuts now on a daily basis. I am losing officers, losing offices, full stop. We cannot afford to pay that money. So what we've done with Napier is my staff are lecturing in like MSc courses here. They're teaching the computing science kids about what the current problems are, what we are facing out there at the sharp end. In return, Napier are working with us to design courses, to train my officers, and actually to upskill staff that we've got just now to try and make them better investigators in the cyber world. That, to me, that partnership between law enforcement and academia is absolutely fundamental to us moving things ahead in Scotland. Bring us back, let's move away from the threat, the problems, the challenges that we actually have in relation to this now. I see this as a huge opportunity as well. Small country, we've got a very, very strong academic sector in relation to some of these areas. How do we actually pull that together to turn it to the benefit of Scotland? Let's look at it at its actual core basis, the biggest problem we have, the threat to our children and the threat to business. How do we tackle that? Well, my argument would be we start in primary school. We actually underpin everything with the basic cyber security, the cyber hygiene message. That then passes into secondary school, where we start to teach it more involved, we start to try and awaken the interest. From that, we hope to be able to protect our children. One of the things we're looking at just now is how do we actually get the message out there? The kids are vulnerable, but one of the biggest other areas of vulnerability is the silver surfer, the over 50s, who are the biggest growing area on the internet. Sometimes substantial disposable income, but often the people who are the least cyber aware, they don't understand the threat. What I passionately believe in, we have the solution to tackle this in Scotland. From work and school and actually putting that message to the kids, what do? We take those children, get them to go home to their parents and grandparents and actually put out the absolute basics in relation to cyber security. The concept of Pareto's principle, or the 80-20 rule, passwords, antivirus, updates, the very, very simple parts that protect you against 80% of the threat out there. What better way to get that message across to the grandparents in Scotland through the children? And that, to my mind, could be a huge benefit for education if we seize upon that. The hope from that secondary school is we stimulate an interest in the kids in cyber as a potential career, and they start looking at progressing towards tertiary education. Seen the jobs, the availability of highly paid jobs. We've recently been working with Abertay with some internships in relation to the ethical hacking course, putting them out there into small and medium businesses to actually pen test and to show them. These companies can't afford the £6,000, £7,000, £8,000 a day the big companies charge. But we're using these kids to actually go out there. They are now walking into very, very highly paid jobs after 6 months' experience doing this. We've got a fantastic market in Scotland for this, and we need to seize upon it. But for those kids who decide not to move into tertiary education, if we have actually laid a firm foundation for cyber security at the outset with them, they go into the existing businesses, and the hope is that they are able to upskill that business, make the business understand the basic threats and what can be done to tackle it. The whole objective there is to target hard in Scotland, make our kids, our parents, our grandparents, our businesses more secure from cyber attack. And again, the hope from that as well is that we can actually grow cyber security as a business in its own right across Scotland. I fundamentally believe that we have got the raw material in Scotland to make a huge success of this. But what's the future? This is not something that can be tackled by one part of government, one agency or business together. It needs to be law enforcement working with business, working with government. But I believe that education has actually got the biggest thing to offer in Scotland in relation to this, that we can actually develop cyber by instilling that interest right at the start and making our kids far, far safer. Key steps. How do we take this forward? Take it back to that early slide regarding victims of crime online. Everybody gets what we try to do in police force about safer communities. Violence reduction, reducing alcohol abuse, reducing sexual offences. But if most of the population of Scotland are now living a substantial part of their time online, police force, we now need to start thinking about how do we protect our virtual communities. From that, how do we actually inspire interest in children in cyber? Secondary, I think it's too late. It's got to be primary school. You see the kids now sitting at 5, 6, 7-year-olds with their iPads. They get it far more than what we ever did at that age. They are the future. Tackling the gender gap. It's something we've got to look at really, really seriously, because I would suggest just now 12% of my staff in forensic computing are female. I think that's probably replicated right across industry. How do we actually switch girls onto this as a career, as something they want to do? Something we need to look at. The curriculum question. Is the curriculum appropriate now for where we are going over the next 5 years in relation to this? Do we need to look at actually changing the curriculum to make it more attuned to what the threat and what the opportunity is out there? One for you all to consider. Another one, who should actually deliver the cyber message? You've got police officers, and I'm sure some of you get the campus cops in your schools coming in to deliver the message. Do they have sufficient technical knowledge to actually deliver it? My experience is that some of the kids sitting in first and second year may be more technically literate than what my cops are. Are we the right people to put it across? Again, guidance teachers for PSE, are they the right individuals to actually deliver this message? Or does it sit with computing science teachers, the people who have got the highest level knowledge amongst this whole group? But to do that, there needs to be investment in your skills. There needs to be a bigger focus on cyber, digital, computing science at school level to actually allow this to happen. Continuous professional development. Again, we are struggling with my officers to keep abreast of what's happening. Equally, I fully understand the difficulties teachers must have in relation to keeping up with what's happening out there. And again, by the time you get to third and fourth year, do you have kids who are more technically able than what you are? That may well be the case in some areas. One of the cases we've looked at recently, or one of the initiatives we've had with Scott Hunter from Kyle Academy. Scott, stick your hand up, just to embarrass you. Scott's developed a 12-week programme to put out to the kids at Kyle Academy, looking at all aspects of cyber security, trying to awaken that interest. But one of the most interesting things he's done is put a 3-week portion of this is for the kids to go out, to go back to the parents and the grandparents and try and put out the cyber security message. And I think, Scott, the initial feedback is very, very positive from the parents. Okay. I think this is potentially the type of thing we need to be looking at to deliver across Scotland. There's a fantastic opportunity there for us to do it. What I've seen covering entire Scotland for this is there's a huge amount of really good work going on in relation to this area across a multitude of areas between police, education and the universities. My big worry is that we are all operating too much in silos, and I think there needs to be that strategic vision about how do we actually take this and develop it so we are all going the exact same direction in Scotland. And that's one of the main reasons for coming here today, is to try and float that with yourselves. We're speaking at a senior level, the education in Scotland just now, about how we actually do it, who delivers that message. But my final point today is to suggest that I appreciate over the last couple of years was a manifesto pledged by the government in relation to foreign languages, and kids have now getting French, etc. My question would be, is computing science, is safety online, is cyber hygiene a lesser priority in relation to speaking a foreign language? Maybe I'm coming from a stilted viewpoint in relation to this, but I would like to see Scotland seize on the opportunity for this and actually develop computing science as a national priority. But that fundamentally requires investment in your skills. It requires head teachers to see it as a priority and not something that's a secondary subject that should be forgotten about. And that, to my mind, ladies and gentlemen, is how we need to move this ahead in Scotland over the next couple of years. Thank you.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Okay.
I don't think anybody in this room would disagree with many of those points that you brought up about computer science being a national priority and updating the curriculum. In fact, updating the curriculum is something that CAS has been involved in and trying to get a new curriculum, a new experiences and outcomes sorted out and trialled out in schools and then recommended to Education Scotland. So we probably need to speak to you about that,
Absolutely.
about what we should have for cybersecurity. Excellent. Do we have any questions just now for Stephen? One at the back there.
What challenges do you face in terms of recruiting officers to your team?
What challenges do you face in terms of recruiting to your officers to your team?
I think the skill set, there's actually a lot of staff are keen to try, a lot of people see this as the future of policing as well. The basic skill level to actually allow them to do the job is a big problem. There's computer enthusiasts, but I don't have many people coming into the police with a requisite degree to become a forensic officer or indeed to go and do the advanced network investigations. The consequence then is I need to put them on really expensive training courses to try and get them to do that. And that's where we need to try to change our recruitment process. If we can get people in with those base skills, it allows me to have people who actually can hit the ground running and we can develop far better. Yeah, absolutely. Recently, we brought 10 new staff into sort of policing the forensic side of things, all with degrees at different levels up to MSc, who have decided, who have been in industry, didn't enjoy it, wanted to move into policing as they saw it, and then they saw a real potential for what their skill set is. And I've got to say, they are the senior officers of the future because they completely and utterly get this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Stephen. Thank you. Excellent.